Hi, I'm David Ellis. I'm the editor of the Reveller here at the Evening Standard, and I'm really thrilled to be joined by Marcus Wareing. A globally respected Michelin-starred chef, Marcus got his start in food early, about age 11, when he spent his school holidays helping pack potatoes for his father's business. Late in his late teens, went to the Savoy as a commis chef, then trained under the late Albert Roux at Le Gave Roche, and then at just 25, he won his first Michelin star. Today, he is the well-respected chef patron at his eponymous restaurant, Marcus. He's got 8 successful cookbooks under his belt, and you may well know him as a judge of MasterChef The Professionals. So, Marcus, thanks so much for sitting down and spending a bit of time with me today.
My pleasure. Great to be here. Nice to see you.
Marcus, I thought we might just start by reflecting on the past 14, 15 months. You're well known for working hard in the industry, and I think that list of accolades that I've just summed up shows how much you do. It must have been an incredible change of pace last March when things began to go awry.
A change of pace is an understatement. I mean, it was extraordinary feeling, but I think that for an industry, but for me, or for everybody, to be fair, the shock, the uncertainty, the unknown was there was just so many. I think just stopping work right there, literally being told to by the Prime Minister, was a bit of an odd situation, but it was the same for everybody. But there's so many other things came with that decision. It was more than me just slowing down. It was, for me, wow, the list is so long of all the different scenarios. We could talk about them all day, but it wasn't a very nice feeling, I have to say.
And I suppose, although from the outside it's a stop, for you it's a ramping up, right? Because you must have all your staff come to you. It's not just dealing with your own crisis of how do I make this work, how do I deal with my suppliers, but also how do I make the team members feel okay? How can I reassure them in these times? Could you speak a little bit about what that felt like to be the captain at that point and how difficult that might have been?
The hardest part was when we sort of got a bit of notice a couple of days before Boris's announcement of the country being closed. Was the industry was about to make some huge changes, and I actually remember having the teams in the restaurant, everybody from office, cooks, kitchen porters, waiters, everybody in the room, telling them that we are trying to explain the situation that we were in as an industry, but as a restaurant, as a company, and trying to explain what to do next, but not really knowing myself what to do next, because it was just every hour of every day there was something was changing. So it was a really weird. I can picture the meeting in my head right now, and the silence in the team. A team that's never silent went silent. They went quiet. You could see the blood drain from their face of uncertainty, of worry, of concern. The restaurant's closing. We don't know when we're going to be reopened. We don't even know whether we'll be able to pay you any money. All the questions would pour out. I would be putting this scenario in front of them. They would sit in silence, and then it just took one person to speak, and then you just this whole barrage of concern from the teams that I had to deal with right there and then. So I had to put I almost put in my head. I said, right, you just have to be a father now. Think as that you that are the father of all these people in front of you. What would you say to them? We will take care of this, and we will make sure we'll get through it. We don't know where we're going, but if we all stay in touch, then we should find our way. But if you just leave this with me and my management team, we will do our best to see what type of situation we were in. And that's sort of all I could do at that particular point. And then we had to say goodbye to everybody. Literally just closed the things down, gave all the food that we had in the fridges away to the teams, all open bottles of wine and bits of champagne that hadn't been used. We just gave them all away, emptied the fridges, cleaned them out, switched the lights off, locked the door. It was as straightforward as that, really. It was like, yeah.
I mean, thank God that they worked at such a nice restaurant, so that at least the leaving gifts were okay. But I mean, it's interesting because the dynamic I mean, it's good champagne, it's good wine. But the dynamic there you talk about, that is really intriguing, because the idea there that you are having to step in on sort of a more personal level, and that is forever going to change the working relationship that you have with them. Just to talk a bit more about you on a personal level, how did you stay sane at home, not being in the kitchen, not running your businesses in such sort of the same capacity
Yeah,
that you normally would? I
yeah,
read somewhere that you did an interview and you said to your wife, "Please don't make me take off my chef's whites." Could you just
yeah,
expand on what you meant by that?
yeah. What I mean by that is that when I met Jane many years ago, when we were going out with each other, and actually it was sort of the pre-getting married, was that if my dad always said to me, never change who you are or who you want to be, and the most important thing in life is meeting a partner that understands what you are and who you are. And the only request I had was that don't ask me to be anything but a chef. Don't ask me to take the chef's jacket off. And what I
Mm-hmm.
mean by that is all I am. That is all that I do. All the things that you mentioned earlier that I have done is because of that
Mm-hmm.
jacket and the way in which I have worked within that, and that is almost, I suppose you could say, soldier-esque in a sense. I respect it. We wash it, I look after it, I iron it, and I put it on, and I wear it as a uniform. And I ask all my chefs to do the same, and I ask all the people that I meet if I'm inspiring people in a conversation or in a talk or meeting young people who are in the catering industry coming up. You can be anything you want in this industry if you're prepared to put your mind to it. But the key point was, don't ask me to change. What Boris did
Mm-hmm.
and what the government did was not just stop me, but he stopped the country, and then you could see the ramifications across the globe, across Europe, and then you realised that it was a bigger thing than just me, my industry, and my family. Keeping
Mm-hmm.
sane was about being in the family. Being locked in was quite strange. Only being allowed out for exercise or walk the dog, crossing the road when someone was coming the opposite direction to you was weird. All these weird things. In
Mm-hmm.
some of the days that I had my family around me. I had my space. I had my Zoom calls, and you spent a lot of time worrying and wondering. And there was a few nights where the kids and my wife family had gone to bed, and I was sat wondering, I really don't know where this is going. And what used to keep me going was that there are people in the country and around the world that are in a lot more difficult position than me, and it's sort of, you get the feeling of togetherness. You got the feeling
Mm-hmm.
of generosity that we all spread across. A lot of more social media. We make contact with people that make actually touching base with people that you've not touched base with for years potentially, and saying, "Are you
Mm-hmm.
okay? Is everything okay? Can we do some shopping?" And it was interesting because I think we've all changed a little bit. And if you haven't
Mm-hmm.
changed after COVID, then wow, you must be pretty thick-skinned.
Yeah, I think everyone I speak to is always like, it's been a constant revolution this year. And it's interesting what you say there, just because hospitality is a very chummy business, but an incredibly competitive one as well. And I
Yeah,
think this year we've seen people who've really sort of come out in support of each other because they realise that that sort of "I've got to come first" mentality at the time is not the right thing to do. Um, One thing I was going to ask is, so yeah, that's a lot to go through, and as you say, you probably were more fortunate than many. But after years at the top, it must be quite frightening, to say the least, to suddenly find yourself in this position where you realise this empire that you have is quite fragile. Was that a reckoning, or did you just always think there's always more, we'll always keep going, and as you say, put the uniform on and plow on,
yeah.
or were there moments where it made you reconsider your style and what your career means to you?
I think a lot of people were rethinking. I think a lot of people were thinking about change. People were concerned about landlords, concerned about furlough, concerned about actually, is there going to be enough money in the bank to continue? I made all my adjustments pretty quickly early on. The first lockdown, when Rishi did the Eat Out to Help Out, I thought it was a great idea. But actually, when we all looked at it, there was a sense of, this is great. People going out, it's helping an industry get started again. But the ramifications of that decision were huge, because then that created the second lockdown. But this whole thing was a journey that was forever changing. It was like a silent army war going on around you that you can't see. You can't stop it from getting to you. And it's this, it's the COVID, and it was very strange in many ways. But we, as a restaurants, I decided in some of those days, right, how am I going to move forward? What do I want to do when we may get through this? I turned 50 last year in COVID,
Mm.
where it was the first lockdown, so it was in June last year. So couldn't go out, couldn't celebrate, couldn't do anything, and that was fine. I was really fine with that. But when you turn 50, it's a milestone in your life. It is. It is. I've never really been bothered about birthdays too much. I've never really been bothered
Mm.
about a number. But when you hit that 50, you think, I remember when my parents turned 50, and that they were really, really old when they turned 50, as that young boy that I was back then. And actually,
Yeah.
I feel great. I feel strong. I feel better than I've ever done. And I thought to myself,
Mhm.
right, this is a big number now. What am I going to do after this? Because if you don't change, if you don't want to change what you are and who you are now, then you've got to be prepared to try and continue. And so that's what I started to do. So it started to make contact with my book publishers, with TV, with agents, with possible future restaurants, and really getting busy on the emails, getting busy onto the Zoom calls, making contact with people, and not sitting still. Just because the government locked you in doesn't mean to say that you can
Mhm.
sit still. And that's
Yeah.
what I did, and that's what. And now coming out of this, I've got a lot of things going on, and it's great. It's keeping me busy, but it's a very different future in front of me, I think.
And I suppose in a way, this sounds a flippant way to put it, but it does keep you on your toes because all these plans that you have, 10 years, 15 years down the line, they're all suddenly being recalibrated. And in a way, that might be quite invigorating.
Yeah.
Let's talk about one change that did happen across the industry and for yourself was meal boxes.
Yeah.
Were you surprised by the appetite that there was for them? And do you think that that appetite is likely to be sustained very much longer?
I did get my head around it the first time round, and I did particularly want to do it. And then the second lockdown came, and then the third lockdown, and my team came to me with a plan and an idea, and we started it, and it was incredibly popular, and I was surprised. But I also saw the world of takeaways and meals, pizzas being ridden around London left, right, and centre, and all different types of foods being, the world had changed, so food was being delivered through a post box, and like a little bit like a takeaway. And I thought, the restaurant industry had to get on board with this and give it a shot, and we did. And it's been incredibly successful in a period of time that we had staff who could earn a little bit more money than their furlough. It helped
Mhm.
people's social welfare, their mental health. It got them out a little bit more, and it was safer the second time round. In the first lockdown, it was locked. You were locked, apart from
Mhm.
if you were running a takeaway. And so it's been an interesting approach for us. I think there is legs with it. I think it can move forward. I think if you want to be an entrepreneur, you can continue these ideas. But I think the general public
Mhm.
just want to get out and eat, and I think that's what people want to do. They've enjoyed the food boxes, but deep down
Mhm.
inside, they just want to get back to restaurants. People want to be served. They love that luxury of going into a lovely restaurant or a bar or a pub and just hanging out and meeting people. So I think the novelty wore off the closer we got to reopening the restaurants this time round.
That, like you say, it's really pulled into focus what a restaurant means for me. And actually, food's important, but really, it's that buzz, the hum when it starts going, all of
Yeah.
that. Just before we move on to the industry as a whole and talk more broadly about hospitality and how it's recovered, I just wondered if you could give me maybe one personal high point of the year and maybe one personal low point for you as a person as much as you are a chef.
I think one of the things that came to an end that was a bit sad, and I couldn't say goodbye to my team, was that I closed the Gilbert Scott after 10 years
Hmm.
in May. And it closed during the lockdown. I didn't get a chance to actually raise a glass to the team and all the customers. It was always a 10-year deal. It came to an end during the pandemic. And it's been 10 solid years of my life. But
Hmm.
I've already been planning what I was going to do post that anyway. So I've got a lot of things on the horizon. But I think it was the closing of that chapter was a bit sad for me. That was a real low point, and I've only done it through Zoom or done it through a newsletter. And all those people that worked for me have gone now. They've all gone into other industry, or they've all moved on, or they've all gone home. And yeah,
Mm.
customers I won't get to see again. So that that was sad. That was big 10 years of my life, and I really enjoyed working in that business that we created and working in that amazing hotel. I
Mm.
think one of the best things that I've done, actually re-look at how we cook at home. Um,
Mm.
if you ever get locked down, one of the best things to get locked down with is a chef, because you get great food. And I
Uh,
wrote my eighth cookbook in the last 14 months, and I sort of put the deal together right at the beginning of the lockdown, and I've looked at it in a completely different way. Whereas now, the last year, I've had time to write this book, and I've had time to
mhm,
look at how we really utilize food in our fridges, in our store cupboards, how we go out and
mhm.
shop. And I'm always looking at what's going on in my fridges at home and in my cupboards. But while I was in lockdown, I really did get into the nitty gritty of it, which drove my wife
Yeah.
insane from time to time. But she knows who she married.
Um, yeah, I mean, having been locked down with someone who really knows how to cook, it's been great because it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Let's move on to talk more broadly about hospitality, which is something you have spoken up a lot about over the past year. You've been very vocal across the press, including in the Standards, and also just on Twitter. Hospitality was the industry that potentially, or arguably at least, was among the hardest hit. There were enormous job losses. There were restaurants that closed. There was the constant reopening. There was enormous stresses. How do you think the government handled it, if you were able to sum it up? And what things do you now look back and go, we could have done this differently? And then I
Mm.
suppose just one final point on that. Uh, a lot of people that I've spoken to over the year have just said it's felt very personal, like it's just against restaurants and pubs. Do you feel that? Do you feel like restaurants were unfairly singled out?
No, well, look at theatres. Look at West End of London. Just look at all types of different businesses that hit. Look at all the self-employed people that have been hit. It's okay. It's You can't just have one industry feeling upset about itself. There's been a huge amount of anger, and at the first
Hmm.
lockdown, I think we were all getting onto all different platforms to express ourselves. Our industry
Hmm.
doesn't have a minister for hospitality, and now we're looking
Hmm.
at this as an industry and thinking, "Oh, we've missed a trick. We should have done something about this." Sports has it. Other industries have this. We have a voice in
Hmm.
government, and we don't. Unfortunately, pubs, bars, restaurants, theatres, cinemas, that's where people socialise. So you can't really knock, in my opinion, the government for doing something that was actually a commonsensical thing to do, because you had to stop people from mixing. So
Hmm.
unfortunately, my job is a social job, and the government had to make those decisions. Um, all of the scenarios that have come up since in the last 14 months of what was right, what was wrong, I'm a little bit tired of it going over it over and over again, and I know the government have to be held accountable. Personally,
Hmm.
I think there's not a government in the world knew how to deal with something like this. There's not a country, a city that has done any better than any other. What I am proud
Hmm.
of is the vaccine, the rollout, the way in which we
Hmm.
lead, and we are leading in that process. There's a lot of things that we could all get angry about what Boris and his government have done and said and all the scenarios, but can we just get on and move forward now, and start to rebuild? Because we've been through the two world wars and we came out of all of that, and there's a lot of change came out of that. I think there's
Hmm.
going to be a lot of change that's going to come out of this, not just here, but across the platform, across the globe.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the UK has segregated itself from the EU through leaving the European
Hmm.
community, and because of that decision that our country's made, our industry is suffering more because of
Hmm.
not being part of the European Union than actually the pandemic, because
Hmm.
the getting of the goods, the costs, the expense, the slowness of getting fresh produce over here, but the staffing levels that we are now suffering are incredible, and the shortage of
Yeah.
people coming into the country to work is quite scary. So now that I look
Hmm.
back and I see where I am, I've gone from where I've worked, who I've worked alongside, the companies that I've worked with, and the three restaurants. It I actually feel that having one restaurant now gives me one focus to be able to do what I want
Yeah.
to do now in what is going to
Hmm.
be a very, very difficult time for the next 2, 3, 4 years for an industry that doesn't have a workforce to be able to deal with it.
Yeah, I think the staffing crisis is a big one. We ran something just last week about it, talking to people because they're saying that Brexit's sort of been forgotten by all of this, and actually, as you say, maybe it's time to move forward. This has happened. No one predicted Brexit. It's something that we've known about for a while, and we really have to get a grip on it. One other thing that you just mentioned there that I would like to discuss is the Seat at the Table campaign, which you're vocal of and you're support of, and the hospitality minister. Given that people can't decide who that minister is, what do you think it's important and why? And do you think it makes a difference? Sorry, because people are like, we definitely need to have one. And I'm like, yes, but that person might be completely unqualified to talk about it. And so I just kind of wanted to get into that nuance of it, sort of what fundamentally for you is the reason that that person should be there?
I think because the industry is so big and so diverse. And I think that if you look back and you say, well, you can't treat a pub the same as a restaurant, as you can't treat various different parts of the industry the same. And I think a minister would have been able to advise government that the detail of an industry. The government knows nothing about my industry. They know how to eat and drink, but they don't necessarily know the nooks and the crannies of how it works. So that voice going into Parliament or going in and advising, that advisory person is crucial for a government to understand an industry. I wouldn't expect the government to understand how an industry works, but I think to treat all as one was a mistake, and they could have been dealt with. That could have been dealt with in a slightly different way, and put tier systems into the equation and sectors of an industry. But that takes a very brave government to do that. They can't do it without that advice, and so without that minister, there was no advice. Who should that be? I don't know. I think that's for the industry as a whole to decide, and there needs to be a little bit like the Mayor of London. People need to throw their hat into the ring, and there needs to be a big long debate, and there needs to be a way forward of who should that be, and why, and the industry should decide on who that is, and I think that's probably the best way to move forward.
Okay, let's sort of move on to slightly more optimistic territories now. It's been great to reflect, but I know that we're probably both keen to talk about how the future is looking. One thing we mentioned earlier about people sat outside in the rain under umbrellas but still powering on through. What's it been like to see this alfresco spring that's been, I mean, I can't really remember such a washout, but just to see people embracing hospitality and going out, what's that felt like? It must have felt pretty good, right?
It did feel good, but it does make me laugh, I have to say, because it's mad. I live in Wimbledon, and I was seeing people just outside restaurants with umbrellas up, just eating deep fried chips and burgers, and I'm looking at what they're eating. I'm thinking, is that really worth sitting in the rain for? And I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Last year was incredible because the summer was great. And then in August, September, alfresco dining looked amazing. I mean, our general manager of the Berkeley Hotel, Knut, he put a fantastic dining space at the side of the hotel in what was a ballroom entrance / car park. And when I remember when he mentioned it to me, and I thought, really, is there going to be anyone who's going to want to come and eat there? Wow, did I eat my words? It was beautiful, and they dressed it up, they put olive trees, and it was almost sitting in an English country garden with the feeling of the south of France, with the umbrellas and the olive trees next to a beautiful church and a beautiful hotel. And it was clever, and I took my hat off to that. And I think that you saw a lot of that happening last summer, that they tried to replicate this year, but we just haven't had the weather. So good on people for getting out there and spending their money and going into the beer gardens. A lot of restaurants and pubs have invested into a lot of equipment to be able to feed and give people drink outside. And I think that now we're up and running, there's a whole new sort of side to an industry of we can eat outside no matter what the weather is. And we've got these gardens and we've got these tables and chairs. Let's use them. So more space for everybody. More space, the better, I think.
Yeah. Well, one thing you mentioned there about people going out and spending their money, there was a survey that you released a little while ago, and it was saying that the people who responded said 54 of them plan to spend the same amount as they had before, i.e. that people would be spending less. But sort of anecdotally, I've been hearing that spends are up across the industry as people start to embrace. What's your experience of it, and what do you think it's going to be as we're going forward? Do you think people are going to be spending more or less, or pretty much when it all settles down the same?
At the moment, it's spending more. I think people are, without doubt, they're creating a lot of scenarios, family gatherings, friends gathering, celebrations, and there's a lot of people who have not stopped work through the pandemic. 70 plus, I'm not sure what it is, of industries have carried on, and they've not had a chance to spend their money in hospitality. They've not been abroad. They've not been skiing. They've not, there's a lot of cash in people's bank accounts waiting to be spent, and they're actually coming out and spending it. And I think for the economy, the whole staycation thing in the UK. If there's one thing I'd say to the general public, if you can stay in the UK and maybe spend a bit more time here this summer, please, please, please do so, because we need your spending, we need your support, and we really do want people to enjoy. If there's one time you want to enjoy your own country, it's probably this summer, because we're all itching to go abroad, and we all love going abroad. I do, but this summer I can't go on holiday. I'm going to work. I've got my restaurant to rebuild. I've got my new things that I'm getting my teeth stuck into, and I really am excited, but I've not got time for a holiday. I've been closed. I've got to go back to work and really work hard to rebuild and put some money back into the coffers of the government, and that's what I'm doing, because I think that's really important. So eat in the UK, travel the UK, spend some time here, spend your money here. I am worried about everyone rushing off to go abroad. If I'm honest, that is a huge concern of mine at the moment, and why we feel that is so important when we have done so much in the last 14 months. We've sacrificed so much. We have to be very, very careful.
Well, I think the rallying cry to encourage people to go out and embrace London and UK dining, because there is so much to see, feels like rather a nice place to leave this. So I just want to say thank you so much for your time, Marcus. I really, really appreciate it, and it's been so great to have your insight on it. And just good luck. I think it could be an exciting year.
Thank you very much for your time. Thanks a lot, David.
Thank you.